Good afternoon, good evening from Jerusalem. I'm Yaakov Katz, a senior fellow at the Jewish People Policy Institute, and welcome to another episode of our weekly, now into our fourth week, briefings and inside analysis of what's happening in Israel's war against Hamas. Lots to talk about. Fortunately, bad news here in Israel overnight, with the death toll rising and the number of Israeli soldiers who are getting killed, unfortunately, in fierce clashes that they're encountering in the Gaza Strip, primarily in the area known as the Jabalia refugee camp. Lots of action still on the ground as Israel continues to encircle Hamas strongholds and to cut off the supply of weapons and to hunt down many of those Hamas fighters. Today we have an interesting panel and interviewee. Earlier today, I had the opportunity to catch up with Yair Ramati. Yair was just until a few years ago, the head of the IMDO, the Israel Missile Defense Organization, which is the equivalent of America's MDA, Missile Defense Agency. They are responsible for the development, funding, and procurement of Israel's really sophisticated missile defense architecture. Many of us are familiar with Iron Dome, but there are a number of additional systems such as David Sling for the more medium-range rockets, as well as Arrow, and we have Arrow 2 as well as Arrow 3. But the reason that I decided to catch up with Yair was because Arrow 2 was used for the first time in combat yesterday against a ballistic missile that was fired by the Houthis in Yemen towards southern Israel, a range of about 1,700 kilometers. So very interesting to see the Arrow 2 in action and actually working. And as Yair himself points out, this sends a clear message to the Iranians who might be watching and thinking about their own ballistic missile arsenal one day and unleashing it on the state of Israel. So important that that missile interception was successful. After Yair Ramati, we have a great panel today. Our first member is Robert Newfield, Lieutenant Colonel in the Reserves, a veteran of Israel's the Judge Advocate General or Military Advocate General's office, Robert was the legal advisor to the Air Force, to Israel's military intelligence directorate, and just a senior official within the Israeli military legal apparatus. And we're also joined here by Sarit Zahavi, another lieutenant colonel in the reserves, who's the head of ALMA, basically a think tank that really takes a deep look at what's happening in the north with Hezbollah. So we're going to have a deep dive into Hezbollah because of everything that's going on there, continued skirmishes along the border. We'll hear more about that, as well as kind of the legal aspects that come of it. But for now, for the first few minutes, here is the interview that I did earlier with Yair Ramati, the former head of Israel's Missile Defense Organization. Yair, it's great to have you with us at JPPI. Thank you for joining us today. What we've seen over the last 3.5 weeks, almost 4 weeks of this conflict and of this war, is really the entire Israel missile defense architecture is at play. Iron Dome, of course, for the short-range rockets. We've seen some of the use of David Sling. And just yesterday, as far as I know, was the first operational use and successful interception of the Arrow missile. So maybe you could just explain to our listeners and viewers, what exactly does Israel have? What does each system do? And how unique is this missile defense architecture when we look at other countries in the world?
So that's an excellent question, because Israel deploy two tiers of air defense. The first one is the upper tier, which composed of Arrow 2 and Arrow 3. Yesterday interception of the Houthis, well, actually it is Iranian ballistic missile, was done by Arrow 2 interceptor based on full array in Israel. The second tier is Iron Dome and David Sling. Iron Dome is a backbone of the Israeli air and missile defense that cover most of the sites in Israel, but you need a lot of batteries to defend even a small country like Israel. And sometimes small is beautiful. For air defense, small is beautiful. The uniqueness of those two layers is that first, we need to engage all azimuth. Second, variety of threats. It means from mortar shell short-range rockets, heavy rockets, ballistic missiles, cruise missiles, all types of drones and UAV, so on and so forth, all of those type of threats simultaneously, hopefully, to most of the population. Can we achieve 100%? The answer is no. On the other hand, while we are trying to cope with all of those air threats, we need to be careful and to be able to provide the population also alert. It means that the sensors, the same sensors that track and engage air ballistic targets are the same sensors that provide the population, the alert and on the entire Israel area. The passive defense is also a cornerstone in this defense.
So Israel has those multiple layers, and I think we are unique. Obviously, longer range. We've seen other systems like the THAAD that the Americans have, PAC-3, which is another U.S. system. But really, it's the lower range, which is the rockets that mostly are fired at Israel, especially from the Gaza Strip, which we see mostly in play. I'm curious, and I want to talk to you. I want to get to the laser because that's what a lot of people want to talk about. But even before the laser, which I think probably started during your tenure at the Israeli Defense Ministry defense organization. But the American systems that are now here in the region, in the Eastern Med, as well as in the Persian Gulf area. And we saw when the Houthis first attacked Israel last week, we did see that the THAAD was effective in intercepting some of those rockets or missiles. Maybe it was another American system. Do we know how to work together with the U.S. in coordinating whose missile defense is going to be used for what target?
Okay, I will respond to your question within a minute, but basically Israel is working with U.S. hand with hand. No doubt that the U.S. support to the Israel missile defense and all air defense array is essential in terms of joint development, joint exercise, and what we call interoperability. We are engineers, so for engineers, interoperability means the data is coming for all sensors. U.S. strategic assets such as spaceborne, shipborne, and also airborne sensors, all of them are fused together and creating a single air situation picture. Part of it are coming to Israel or other U.S. allies. On the same token, Israel is collecting those data and providing it to US. This is what we call interoperability. So those three levels of cooperation are very important and essential. What happened with the Houthis? The Houthis has the distance from Yemen, north part of Yemen to Israel, depends where you measure it. It's about 1,700 kilometers, 1,000 miles, to a little more than that, up to Tel Aviv, maybe 2,000 kilometers, 2,100 kilometers. But if you launch it by ballistic missiles, this is a direct distance. However, if you're launching a cruise missile, small cruise missile, compact cruise missile, the name is Quds. Quds in Arabic is Jerusalem. They used it, obviously they took it directly from Iran, but right. The name is Quds to fight against UAE or Saudi Arabia to the kingdom. No, now it's being launched to Israel. They can arrive to Israel. The second system, they have two types of UAV drone, one-way drone. Those drones are flying very slow. Those drones are the core of the Iranian attack. Now it's Iranian attack on, I think it was September 14th, 2019, two Aramco sites. One was Abqaiq, and the other one was El Horeis. Abqaiq was attacked by those drones, and El Horeis was with the Quds missile. Well, some of them are falling on the way. By the way, yesterday in Jordan, going around, this is a way that they are trying to overcome U.S. presence in the Red Sea. Now, U.S. help Israel by fleet at least two ships that are now in the Red Sea on the way from Yemen to Israel. First time, I think it was October 19th, was they intercepted a couple of cruise missiles and more than 20 UAVs. On the way, they used the SM-2, standard missile SM-2, on board the Aegis ship, Carney Aegis ship. Now Israel are doing most of the interceptions either by aircraft or by Arrow 2 against a ballistic missile. And it's pity that we had to do the first interception against probably the most stressing target. But it means it's working.
You were one of, I mean, before you joined and took over the Israel Missile Defense Organization, you were one of the lead engineers for years. I mean, I think probably you're one of Israel's leading experts when it comes to missiles in general, but you were specifically involved in the Arrow missile project. So I'm just curious, personally speaking, this is a big deal, right? The interception of Arrow 2 for Israel on a more strategic level to prove its capability and to use it in battle.
Yeah, by the way, it's also sent a good message not only to the engineering community in Israel, the II MLM divisions that develop it, and the radar to ELTA, but also to Iran, because the same missile, it's a Qadr missile family. It's liquid propulsion, separated re-entry vehicle with a warhead. That the same type of missiles are being deployed in Iran, and they see that yes, Israel can intercept them, not by Arrow 3, which is top notch, that will be is part of the agreement between Germany and Israel on selling Arrow 3, but also Arrow 2, the previous generation that was deployed. I think it was Merge 2000 where we deployed the first time, and yes, it's capable, effective. Even to the south, although the system had been designed to the east, it works.
Okay, so Yair, what's going on with the Iron Beam? That's everybody's talking about, the laser. There were videos that were coming out early on in this conflict that people said, "Oh, that's the laser, right?" You see these pulses of light coming out. Turned out that wasn't the laser. It's not yet operational. Where do things stand with it?
Well, you have to see you don't have to see too many videos and. All of these devices, yes, high energy laser has its own merit. It's actually buying high cost gun with a low cost bullets. That's the idea. And at the end of the day, they will be deployed as part of Iron Dome batteries. So if Israel has so and so batteries, on most of them, at the end of the day, part of their effectors will be a high energy laser. The effectiveness of current design is pretty good. It's, I think, viable, and within 2 years, probably we will deploy it. Are we going to test it right now as part of the conflict? I hope yes, but it will not have a significant effect. Still, we are relying on interceptors. Why we are relying on interceptors? There are various reasons, and not only the weather limitations of high energy laser. High energy laser is, I would call it a linear effect. You intercept one, then you go to the second, then you go to the third. In case of salvo, you need the effectiveness of Iron Dome. And keep in mind that sometimes the enemy are trying to stress or saturate our weapon air defense system, and that is what we are doing. So it's additional mean, it will have its merit. Will it be a revolution? I'm not sure. By the way, the Ministry of Defense in Israel is being criticized a lot about the high energy laser. So they achieve a unique PR situation. For one end, they are investing for over 30 years, year by year, on those high energy laser. On the other hand, they receive, as I would say, quite harsh criticism in the media on why they are not deploying it. So they succeeded to be in a unique position.
Never right, well, they got good PR a year ago from the former Prime Minister Bennett, who was talking about, "I want it, it's coming right away." That was a bit premature.
That was too good, I would say, too good. Overdoing. It's a classical overdoing. So the threat on Israel right now is from the south. It's from every day some of, alert in part of the area of Israel, once, twice, maybe three times. From the north, the Hezbollah is about one magnitude of order. Higher rate of launching and heavier warhead, and they have quite significant amount of precision munition, which is a different ballgame.
No, for sure. So sorry to interrupt, but that's the question. I wanna leave you with, and I don't want to take up too much of your time, but the Hezbollah, like you said, an order of magnitude greater, much more in terms of its size and quantity, but also in its quality. Can Israel's missile defense system, which for the most part have been very effective so far, if God forbid the North opens up in a wider scope, are we capable of giving the same level of defense to our civilians?
Well, that's a quite interesting question because from one hand, the population sometimes expect for all in third power. Each part of Israel, all the time, all type of threats. And the answer is we will not be able to provide all of those three layers. We will provide a significant defense, I'm sure about it, including against precision munition. However, precision munition enable you to hit any part of Israel if you launch enough missiles to attack it, because even at 90%, 85, or even more than 90%, you will not guarantee 100% defense. So some of those key sites in Israel will be impacted and destroyed by those armament. Can we defend? Yes. On the same time, we will have to defend from the east, to be prepared at least from Iran and from militia in West Iraq, which are also part of the proxies from Iran. So we will have to deal with all of them simultaneously. It's doable. And once again, I think we should re-emphasize the critical U.S. support multi-year, and it's, I think, the entire administration, all types of administration are supporting Israel with those three levels of joint development and production, and then joint exercise and interoperability.
Yeah. It's quite unique, Israel's missile defense architecture. I want to thank you, Yair Ramati, the former head of Israel's Missile Defense Organization, for joining us here at JPPI. Thank you very much.
It was my pleasure. Thank you very much, and looking forward.
So we have a basic idea of what will happen, God forbid, if the Northern Front is to open up, and will Israel be able to provide the same level of missile defense? Because I think that to an extent, and I kind of said this to Yair, I think we've become a little spoiled, right? Israelis are bombarded. I mean, obviously that's maybe not the best term, but we see so many rockets fired from the Gaza Strip, and for the most part, Iron Dome takes care of them, right? And rockets that were once upon a time a strategic threat to the state of Israel are no longer perceived that way. So on the one hand, it was like a catch-22. We got rockets and we said, okay, we don't have to respond because we have Iron Dome, so we let Hamas continue to grow. But on the other hand, it gives you maneuverability. I've always called it diplomatic maneuverability, not the need to have to respond to each rocket. But Sarit, I want to start with you for a moment. Hezbollah is a different story, right? And it's a different caliber of what they have. So maybe I'd like if you could give us two things. One is what is happening? Why, we see these skirmishes along the border. What does Hezbollah really want to do? And maybe you could tie into that. I was watching earlier today some of these the trailers or the promo for Hassan Nasrallah's big speech on Friday. He's got the glasses on the table, the pen. He's walking by. They're like making these Hollywood-like, trailer films ahead of this Friday speech. Like, what should we be expecting on Friday? But also, what is your prediction of, is this going to escalate in a bigger way? So I know it's a lot to unpack, but maybe you could try to do a bit of that.
I'll do my best. First, I will say that we don't know. It's a lot of evaluations here. But I think that we should try to connect intentions with ideology and plans with specific capabilities. And if we analyze it from this military point of view, it's an old intelligence perception to combine all of that. The conclusion is that at some point of time, Hezbollah will get involved. Okay, now I want to explain. In the past year, the policy, or even maybe year and a half, the policy of Hezbollah along the borderline changed. Actually changed dramatically. Because we saw after the 2006 war, a situation that Hezbollah is concealing its military deployment in South Lebanon. We saw a situation that Hezbollah is very careful of any public deployment and presence on the border. All of that ended a year and a half ago. And then we saw Hezbollah building more and more positions on the border. We've seen them on the border with uniforms. We see them scouting and watching and gathering intelligence on us. We see provocations. People like to call it provocations, but these were also terrorist attacks that were carried on in the past year, including rockets that were actually intercepted above my home on last Passover. I think that all of this exemplify the efforts of Hezbollah to drag Israel into war, or just to be prepared to war, or both. When UNIFIL itself describes 600 crossings from Lebanon to Israel within 4 months between February to June, today, when we understand what Hamas had done, we understand that these 600 crossings were not provocations. They were meant to check the barrier. They were meant to be prepared for the invasion, to understand what are our weak points. This is why they had done that. These were all operational preparations. Since the war had started, Hezbollah is basically going along these lines of preparations for an invasion. Most of the attacks that came from Lebanon in the past weeks were executed by Hezbollah, the majority, the definite majority. There is kind of a division. While Islamic Jihad is responsible for infiltrations, Hamas is responsible for rockets launching, and Hezbollah is responsible for mortars and anti-tanks, trying to damage the Israeli barrier and infrastructures and civilians on the fence and on the borderline itself. I'm saying kind of a division because there are exceptions, and there were also some drones that were launched. I think that on the one hand, it is creating an active front against the state of Israel, making the IDF stretch for at least 2 fronts. You discussed before also at least one more front, which is becoming now Yemen. And we can also say that in Syria, it's kind of a front because we already had 3 attacks from Syria. And West Bank, of course, is something that is happening in the past 2 years. So with Lebanon, it is clear that the interest to create an active front is clear to me. But when I'm trying to think of the targets that Hezbollah chose and the modus operandi that Hezbollah is picking, these are not just accidental Israeli targets. These are targets that are meant to a specific achievement. Now, the retaliation of the IDF was successful. The retaliation of the IDF was to every squad that appears on the Makam next to the border, on the radar, next to the border, whether it's anti-tank, whatever, before it launched or right after it launched, is eliminated. It means that until now, we have around 50 Hezbollah terrorists that were killed. By the way, one of them was killed yesterday. He was 16 years old, using children. This was very successful IDF retaliation very quickly to the threat. And yet this is tactic. We shouldn't be mistaken.
So do you think, Sarit, that Friday Nasrallah announces we're going all in? Is that a possibility?
Of course, it's a possibility, but I'm not positive in this because what I think is happening is that the multi-front campaign of Iran against the state of Israel was launched on October 7th. But this was the day it started. We don't know which day it's going to end. And we don't know how long it's going to take, not only because IDF is fighting in Gaza, but also because we don't know what's the more levels and steps Iran had planned. I believe there is a plan. I believe there is a plan to gradually get everybody involved, but I don't know the tempo of this plan and whether Hezbollah is going to join on Friday or in the winter or within a few months.
Okay, so we're going to get back to that. Robert, I want to turn to you for a moment. You were part of a team, small team that put together a report that was submitted to the government and basically warned, pretty much, if I sum it up in one word, that Israel's home front's not ready, right? Not ready for times of emergency. Not necessarily missile attacks, but just in general, the emergency preparedness of our country is not at what it's supposed to be. And, I think we kind of all know that today, after watching what's happened here over the last almost a month, that if it weren't for civilian volunteers and organizations and people who stepped up to the plate, things would look very different. Whether it's housing the displaced people from the north and the south, but also in all different aspects and fields of treatment, taking care of the hostage families, to just so many other elements of this conflict. When you think about the prospect of the conflict widening also to the north, what more does that mean for the lack of preparedness that we have here in the home front?
Well, I think, first of all, we at this time we can't deal with everything that my report, together with Professor Eli Salzberger, tried to cover. Okay, there's no time to build a new framework, regulations. That's not the time for that. We need to do what is urgent at this time, and what's urgent at this time is hearing Mr. Martin, hearing Mr. Zahavi about the actual. The problem we have with Hezbollah, we have to assume that the harm from was going to be targeted, and missiles are going to pass through through our shields, and houses are going to collapse, and there is going to be damage. What we need at this time is to strengthen the localities, the mayors and their people. That these are the people that know best to approach the community. By the way, if things are going to escalate, there will no longer be a discussion about evacuation. You can't evacuate Tel Aviv. You can't evacuate Givatayim, Beersheba. It's no longer the discussion. The idea would be that we'll need to fight with people that are in their homes. So the localities will play a major role at that time. They need authority. One of the things that we pointed at is that the fact that we all rely on them, but we don't really give them authority. We don't give them powers. Okay, it's not like in the U.S. If our American viewers are listening, the mayor here in Israel doesn't have his own police. The firefighters are not his. Everything is governmental. Everything is not in his hand. We need to surround the localities, give them authority, and give them powers. We need another thing which is important. Is to have volunteers, local volunteers, train them to give, like the Home Front Command battalions will not be anywhere to rescue people from houses that are hit. It can't be everywhere, okay? There with 200,000 missiles Hezbollah has, and tens, let's be hopeful that it's less than that, but with tens of impacts in Israel, they will not be able to be in the first moment, which are the most important ones, in every place, in every way. That's where you need volunteers. You have to train them to give, to be the first ones to give some kind of help to rescue people from, and there were such projects, okay? Teenagers. Right. It's a 1 or 2 days that you can train them to do some basic things. These are the ones that will save the civilians. Civilian lives will be saved if we do that. And there are other stuff that could be done. We can strengthen not only the localities, we can surround it by a better regional coordination, because the assets we have to give at that time would be limited. We need to prioritize. So these are basically the three things I recommend we do now. We still have time, hopefully, unless Nasrallah, as Sarit said, surprises us, but and already goes into war on Friday. But there is time to do things still, hopefully.
I can tell you, like my teenage daughter, who's in 11th grade, is says doesn't understand why she's in school. Right, there's a war going on. I said, but what are you supposed to do? She said I could volunteer. So there's already at least one volunteer, Robert. She's ready. And I'm sure there's other friends of hers who would appreciate to do something meaningful at a time like this.
It should be in the curriculum. Every teenager aged 15, 16, 17 should go through a basic training in their schools, in 2 days training, just just immediate medical care or some idea about how to pull someone out from a wreck. These are the things that can save us. And by the way, the localities personnel can also be trained. Okay, you don't need a parking officer at this time. Okay, he can be trained. Every minute counts. We understand things may deteriorate. Let's make it an opportunity. Understand that answering emergencies is not only for the authorities, as we know here already. Right. Everyone can help.
I can say from my community and communities here up north that the high schoolers are already completely mobilized to volunteering in various fields for the community and for the soldiers here. And I've seen already some courses to learn how to give first aid. In my community, I tried to register and it was already full, and they are planning to have more sessions. So people are already going your way, Robert.
So, Sarit, I want to talk for a moment just about the Hezbollah strategy, right? But for years, and by the way, Nasrallah, after August 14th, 2006, when the Second Lebanon War ended, made that famous statement where he said, had I known that Israel was going to do what it did in these 34 days of war, I never would have ordered the...
Yeah, it was during the war, before it ended.
Before it ended. I never would have ordered the abduction of Eldad Regev and Ehud Goldwasser and attacked Israel and sparked the Second Lebanon War. And since then, we in Israel have been told, yes, Hezbollah is arming, yes, Hezbollah has significant capabilities, massive rocket arsenal, lots of fighters, many of them, by the way, with experience from the years of fighting now in Syria, but that really they know that if there is a war, they can do damage here that we get, because they also have some precision-guided munitions like Yair Ramadi spoke about before. But we will destroy Lebanon. That's always been the saying, right? We will set them back 100 years, Stone Age, whichever term. If he knows that, why would he want to go into a larger conflict with us?
I'm sorry. I think there was a misconception here during the years. And in Alma Center, we tried to change that, but maybe we failed. We constantly said that deterrence is not irrelevant. And we said that the only thing that made Hezbollah or its Iranian boss away from waging war against the state of Israel is their evaluation of their capability. Meaning that when people are saying that Iran was not willing to sacrifice Hezbollah, this is more accurate. It's not about deterrence. It's about how prepared they are. And I think that eventually what happened here is that Iran felt that it came to the point that its militias, not only Hezbollah, also others, are ready, are well prepared. They have finished with preparations. They came to the point that they feel strong enough in the Middle East in general to go for this campaign. And they feel the urgency because there was a process of normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. All of that together brought us to the point that eventually the order was given. I don't accept neither Prime Minister Netanyahu nor President Biden declaration that Iran is not involved. They didn't know the date. They knew the date. They didn't know the date, and they didn't know A decade ago, Hezbollah published its offensive plan in a video in Lebanese Hezbollah media named El Mayadin, a video that describes accurately exactly what eventually happened by Hamas in the south. This video described an invasion to the Galilee by Hezbollah entering into communities, taking over Israeli civilian communities, taking civilians as hostages to be used as human shields. I'm quoting from the video. Entering into Israel after a barrage of firepower to all over the Galilee. This is exactly what happened in the south. So the plan existed, and it took Iran time to build the capabilities, not only in Hezbollah, but also elsewhere. That's why I think this is the campaign we are facing. That's why I believe deterrence is irrelevant. And you know what? You talked about the promos that we see now to Nasrallah's speech on Friday. Yeah. One of these promos that was published yesterday is a video of propaganda of Hezbollah, a long and very dramatic video. I had a dilemma whether to publish it or not. So first we translated it to English. And what you see in the video, the main theme in the video is that Hezbollah is prepared to send its warriors, terrorists, to die for the cost, while for the major goal. What's the major goal? Getting to Jerusalem and killing Israelis. So what do they care about Stone Age? All they wanted is to take over Lebanon. If Lebanon is already in a deep economic crisis, if there is no functioning government, if Lebanon is ruined anyway, what will happen right after the next war between Israel and Hezbollah? A lot of money will get into Lebanon for rebuilding Lebanon. And if Hezbollah is the strongest player there, and it got its legitimacy because it dragged Israel into war, which I believe this is what it wanted, all the money eventually would end up in the hands of Hezbollah. It will only strengthen.
Assuming that they remain in the way they are, in power and in a position.
So that's the question about the evaluation of capabilities in their point of view, of course.
Right. And that would be up to Israel. Yeah. On that note, Robert, in one of your roles within the military advocate general was also about the legal advice to the targeting teams and to approving targets. We saw, for example, yesterday was the bombing of that underground battalion command headquarters of sorts in Jabalia in the northern Gaza. Israel dropped bombs to target this one building and underneath it the tunnel system, but then because it capsized, additional buildings also fell down. And everyone I'm sure who's watching has seen those images of the crater that was created, reports of many other casualties. But, so you sat in on these conversations, on these debates, and I know definitely in 2014 and with the last really big Gaza operation in Protective Edge, in giving approval to these types of targets. So, Gaza is one thing. And maybe that's already changed because we're in a war that we feel is a war that we have no alternative to. But I'm wondering, Hezbollah, with the scope and the scale and how many targets there are and how many rockets will be fired, will be under pressure to attack. Does something change in the legal approval process here?
I don't think anything needs to change. The rules are the same, and the targeting process will be the same. And by the way, at the end of it, if you take the Jabalia example for it, that can happen in Lebanon just the same. We attack military objective when a civilian house has been, in that case, was used for military purposes, and an airstrike was ordered, and the house collapsed, taking down also the entire tunnel system under it. Everything about it is legal. Sometimes people refer to the laws of war as something restrictive. That is not the case. We look at it more restrictive than it is. When you target military objectives, such as we're doing in Gaza, the same we'll do in Lebanon. And every object which is used by Hezbollah for military purposes loses its protection as a civilian object and becomes a military objective.
Yeah.
Now, yes, of course, you have to take precautions, and there is the issue of proportionality. But what is proportionality? Proportionality in that case would be the collateral damage that you assess will not be excessive as to the military objective. And if you go back to the Jabalia case, so taking down the battalion commander with tens of his terrorists together seems to me an incredibly important military objective. And unfortunately, another thing that I have to point, the thing is, what law expects you to is to assess what's feasible, what you can know. You couldn't know that the entire area that it will collapse because you don't know exactly where the tunnels exactly are linked. So you can't even that is not something that is feasible to think about. At the bottom line, the rules that will apply will be the same. Unfortunately, we'll see destruction, and we'll see houses which will turn into a military objective destroyed, and people, unfortunately, the laws of war allow it as collateral damage, as incidental harm. People will die. That's the sad reality of war.
Yeah. War is ugly. Sarit, I want to be cognizant of your time, and we're wrapping up, but I just have one last question for you. Alma, over the years, has released very interesting videos and diagrams of the use of some of these villages in southern Lebanon and how they're used in schools and hospitals and homes. I mean, the extent of Hezbollah's use of civilian infrastructure. Give us an example. What does that mean? Right, what Robert was just talking about. Give us an example of what that means.
Every third home in the Shiite towns of South Lebanon, while most of the towns in South Lebanon are Shiite, is used for military purposes of Hezbollah. Every third home. It could be a headquarters, a warehouse, a launching position, I don't know, medical equipment, food equipment, anything that is military, supportive, or weapons. Every third home. That's one thing. How does that look like? If you talk of, let's take the launching, let's take the rockets. Usually it's the launching site. It can be a parking lot or a soccer field or an amusement park or just a small forest, a bunch of trees in the neighborhood. That's the launching area. The warehouses of where the rockets are, they are not based now in the launching area. They are based in the buildings around it or the factories themselves as well. And in times of war or when they get the order, the truck just pull out, launch from the launching area and goes back to the town. This is when we speak about the human shield. I just want to say one thing about, you mentioned the evacuation of population. Here up north, there were 60,000 people that were evacuated in communities 0 to 5 kilometers from the border. They were not evacuated because of the rockets. They were evacuated because of the offensive plan of Hezbollah to invade into Israel and actually to rescue their lives from an invasion, just like what happened on October 7th. And the biggest question here up north today is what will defend us once the war is over?
If Hezbollah is still there, right?
Yes, if Hezbollah is still there, how can these people go back to their homes? I'm saying that as a resident of the Galilee. I live 9 kilometers from the border. I was not evacuated. And the first thing I had done when all of that started, I looked at the maps and I saw that Ofakim is 12 kilometers from the Gazian border. So they can get that far to my home. How am I going to feel safe in the future? And I think this is the main thing that this war had changed. And you spoke about the Israeli strategy. This war proved us that what the reliance on deterrence and on, sleeping with the monster, this is not an option anymore. We're not going to sleep with the monster anymore because of the missiles and because of the offensive plans.
And this is the big challenge. I think that, you have this reality down south where the people who were evacuated, who we're focused on mostly now, because that's where the main war is raging, they won't go home either for, I speak to people down there for at least a year, if not longer, until they have assurances that their security is guaranteed. But if Hezbollah is still there with all of its power and all its capabilities, what guarantee do we have that they won't do in the north what they did down south 5 months from now, 10 months from now, or a year from now? And I think when we don't have, and that's why if Israel's changing the security paradigm that we've had until now, and I think we all know now that the thinking of the past and the paradigm of the past, to contain these threats, you called it sleeping with the enemy or the monster, literally next to you, that's no longer viable. And this is what really that process that's going on, and the decisions that have to be made are going to be very dramatic and very significant for Israel in the weeks, months, and years to come. I want to thank Sarit Zahavi, the president and founder of Alma, for joining us, as well as Robert Newfield, senior fellow at JPPI. And to all our viewers and listeners, thank you for being with us for another episode of our daily inside analysis of the war. And you will be back tomorrow. In the meantime, prayers for a quiet and peaceful evening. Thank you very much.